The wind howled through the snow-covered streets of Kiranavara, a remote mining village nestled deep within northern Sweden. The air was bitterly cold, biting through even the thickest wool. A thin mist slithered between the ancient pine trees surrounding the village, carrying with it whispers too faint for any ear to catch. In the dim morning light, 17-year-old Ellen Anderson stood at the edge of the forest, her breath visible in the frigid air. Her eyes scanned the tree line, half expecting something or someone to emerge. Behind her, the village stirred slowly to life, but Ellen felt none of the usual comfort that came with the familiar routines. Something was different. Her younger brother, Isaac, had not returned from his evening walk. It was unlike him. He loved routines even more than she did. Ellen had waited until dawn before alerting her father, Stefan, who brushed it off as a typical teenage tantrum. But Ellen's instincts screamed otherwise. She stepped into the woods, boots crunching on the icy ground. The scent of pine mixed with something metallic hung faintly in the air. Her heart pounded harder with every step. The trees seemed to press in closer, as if warning her to turn back. Ellen, a voice called behind her. It was Leif, her best friend, and a local apprentice geologist. He jogged to catch up, concern etched on his pale face. "You shouldn't be out here alone." "What if?" "I need to find Isaac," she interrupted, voice resolute. "Something's wrong, Leif. I can feel it." Reluctantly, Leif nodded and followed her deeper into the forest. As they moved, the whispers in the mist grew louder. Not real words, but sounds that tickled the edge of their minds. The pair stopped near an old Sammy stone circle, long abandoned and half buried in snow. Suddenly, a flash of movement. Ellen spun around, heart racing. "Did you see that?" she whispered. Leif shook his head. "What was it?" I don't know." They approached the center of the stone circle. There, nestled in the snow, was Isaac's red scarf, torn, frozen stiff, and stained with something dark. Ellen fell to her knees. No. Then came the noise, low, guttural, and not quite human, from somewhere just beyond the stones. They were not alone. Leif instinctively pulled Ellen to her feet. His breath came in quick bursts, clouding the air between them. The guttural sound echoed again, deeper this time, vibrating through the cold earth beneath their feet. They didn't speak. They just ran. Snow crunched violently under their boots as they stumbled away from the stone circle, dodging low branches and twisted roots. The forest was alive with noises, creaking trees, whispering winds, and something else. Something following. Only when they reached the edge of the village did they dare to look back. The mist had thickened behind them, blanketing the trees in a ghostly veil. Whatever had been in the forest remained hidden, for now. Inside the Anderson house, the fire crackled weakly in the hearth. Stefan stood at the window, arms crossed, brow furrowed. When Ellen and Leif burst in, soaked and pale, he turned sharply. "Where have you been?" he barked. Ellen didn't answer immediately. She held out the torn red scarf, her hand shaking. Stefan's face went pale. "Where did you find this?" he asked, voice low. "In the forest. Near the old Sammy stones," she whispered. Stefan took a step back. "You shouldn't go near that place." "No one should. Not anymore." "But Isaac's out there," Ellen cried. "We have to do something." Stefan hesitated, then turned away, saying nothing. Later that night, while the village slept under the gaze of a cloud-covered moon, Ellen sat awake. Her mind spun in circles. Something ancient lived in those woods, something her father clearly knew about. But he wouldn't tell her. A soft knock came at her window. She jumped. Outside, Leif's pale face appeared through the glass. She opened it quietly. "There's something you need to see," he whispered. Minutes later, they crept through the snow again, this time headed not for the forest, but the archives beneath the town hall. Leif had stolen the old caretaker's keys. The underground chamber was lined with documents, photographs, and relics of Kiranavara's long history, some of which had clearly been hidden. Leif pulled out a dusty file marked with a faded symbol, 3 circles within a triangle. "My grandfather studied Sami mythology," he said. He used to talk about creatures, spirit guardians, forest watchers. He called them Skogsra. Said they were real. Ellen opened the file. Inside were maps of the forest, charcoal sketches of twisted figures, and photographs of villagers gone missing over the past 50 years. Each disappearance marked near the same cursed spot. "The stone circle," she murmured. "And that sound we heard," Leaf added. "It's been reported before." Ellen looked up, her eyes filled with determination. "We're going back." The forest didn't just take Isaac. It wanted something more. By dawn, the village was cloaked in a silence too thick to be normal. Not even the usual chatter of birds broke through the gray light creeping across the snow. Ellen and Leaf slipped away from their homes once more, carrying lanterns, thick coats, and the stolen file of secrets. Their footsteps led them back to the edge of the forest, where the trees stood like sentinels. The cold felt heavier today, pressing against their skin like warning fingers. As they crossed into the woods, the mist returned, curling low like it remembered them. The deeper they walked, the less they heard. Not even their footsteps made sound after a while. It was as if the snow swallowed all evidence of their intrusion. They found the stone circle again, and something new. A trail of blood in the snow. It wasn't fresh, but it hadn't frozen over completely either. The trail curved around the stones and disappeared into a jagged crack in the earth. Leaf crouched and ran his fingers along the edge. "There's a cave beneath," he said. With a little effort, they slipped through the narrow opening. Inside was dark, colder than above, and the air smelled of minerals and old rot. Ellen lit the lantern, casting shaky golden light on the rough stone walls. Strange markings crawled across them, symbols like those in the file. Further in, the cave widened into a dome, where broken wooden beams and scraps of fabric told of past visitors. Ellen's breath caught. A boot sat in the center of the chamber. It was Isaac's. She ran forward, but Leaf held her back. "Look." Surrounding the boot were small bones, scattered like a ritual. Human? Animal? Neither could tell. Then came the noise, low and rumbling, a growl not meant for human ears. Something stirred in the shadows. The lantern flickered. A form appeared at the edge of the light. Ellen's heart pounded. It was tall, hunched, with antlers tangled in its long black hair. Its face was hidden, but its eyes, they gleamed blue, unnatural, ancient. Ellen froze. The creature didn't move closer. Instead, it slowly lifted a long, crooked hand and pointed deeper into the cave. "What is it doing?" Leaf whispered. I think it wants us to follow," Ellen replied, her voice barely audible. They stepped carefully around the bones and the boot, deeper into the stone chamber, until the creature vanished into the shadows ahead. They followed. The tunnel narrowed, then opened again, revealing a chamber filled with ice columns. Inside each column was a shape, some clearly animal, but others disturbingly human. Ellen gasped. One of them looked like Isaac. His eyes were closed, arms curled as if asleep, frozen in time. "We have to get him out," she whispered. But before they could move, the same growl echoed again, louder this time, and multiple sets of glowing eyes lit up the walls. They weren't alone in the cave. They had never been. Ellen stumbled back as the glowing eyes multiplied in the darkness. There were at least 6, maybe more, shifting slightly behind the ice pillars. She grabbed Leaf's arm, forcing herself to stay quiet, her breath misting in the cold, dense air. "They're watching us," Leaf murmured, barely a whisper. One of the frozen figures near them, a woman with pale hair and wide, terrified eyes, seemed to stare right through Ellen. Trapped in ice, yet almost alive. "Are these the missing people?" Ellen whispered. Leaf nodded slowly. "And whatever those creatures are, they're guarding them." The antlered being stepped into the center of the chamber. This time, its face caught the lantern light. It wasn't just monstrous, it was wrong. Its skin was stretched too tight, its lips stitched closed with black thread, and the antlers sprouted not from a mask, but its skull. It raised its hand again, but this time, it placed a single long finger against its own lips. A warning. A demand for silence. And then, behind Ellen, the cave trembled. A deep groaning noise echoed from the far end of the chamber. The ice around the frozen bodies shimmered, cracked ever so slightly. Ellen turned to see Isaac's form begin to twitch inside the ice. He was alive. "Ellen," Leaf breathed. "We have to do something now." But how? The file they'd stolen didn't explain this. Ellen remembered the symbols, the warning notes, the desperate handwriting. One phrase repeated again and again. "Do not disturb the ice." She pulled the folder from her coat, flipping through until she found it. A page was dog-eared, marked in red. It showed a symbol, 3 intersecting triangles, with a phrase in Old Norse beneath it. She copied the symbol onto the floor with a piece of chalk she had tucked away in her coat pocket, her hands shaking. As she completed the last line, the creature let out a sound. Not a growl this time. A chant. Low, guttural, mournful. The other glowing eyes joined in. And slowly, the ice began to melt. Steam hissed through the chamber, making everything blur. Isaac's shape inside the column swayed forward, his hands twitching, eyes fluttering open. "Ellen!" His voice was hoarse, faint, but unmistakable. She rushed forward, only for the antlered being to block her path. Its stitched mouth quivered. Then it stepped aside. "Go!" Leaf shouted, shoving her toward Isaac as the last of the ice gave way. He collapsed into her arms, trembling and soaked. "Ellen," they kept whispering. All this time, they never stopped. "Save it," she whispered. "We're getting you out." But the moment they turned toward the tunnel, the creatures surrounding them stepped forward, forming a wall of bone and fur and shadow. They did not attack. They just watched. The antlered one knelt and dragged its long finger across the floor beside the chalk symbol, completing a mark Ellen hadn't noticed was missing. Suddenly, the tunnel behind them closed with a grinding crash of stone. There was no way out. The chamber fell silent. Only the soft dripping of melting ice echoed off the walls. Ellen held Isaac tighter, feeling his shallow breaths against her chest. Behind her, Leaf's lantern flickered, casting wild shadows that danced like spirits along the frost-covered stone. The antlered creature slowly approached again. Its eyes were dark hollows, yet Ellen felt them pierce through her. It stopped just in front of the symbol she had drawn, now altered by the creature's hand. The lines pulsed faintly, with a blue light. "They changed it," Leaf said. "What does it mean now?" "I don't know," Ellen whispered. The creature extended its long arm and opened its palm. In it was a shard of ice, clear, almost glass-like, with veins of light running through it. Slowly, it pointed at Ellen, then at Isaac, then pressed the shard against its own chest. "A deal." "They want something," Ellen said. "Something in return?" Leaf stepped forward. "No. You're not giving them anything." But Ellen's eyes stayed locked with the creature's. It was no longer threatening. There was sorrow in its stance, regret, even a loneliness. "I think this place is a prison," Ellen said quietly. "And they're the wardens. Or maybe they were prisoners once, too." The ice surrounding the other frozen figures had stopped melting. The chanting had ceased. All eyes were now on her. "If we leave with Isaac," she said, "maybe the others stay trapped." Leaf gritted his teeth. "That's not a choice we can make." "Maybe it is," she replied. "We came here to uncover the truth. This is it." The antlered creature lifted the shard again, this time reaching toward Ellen. Its touch was surprisingly warm. As it pressed the shard to her forehead, a surge of images flooded her mind. Flashes of ancient rituals, blood offerings beneath auroras, people vanishing in mid-step, pulled into ice as if by unseen hands. And then she saw them, the creatures before they became what they were. Human. Northern settlers, cursed long ago to guard this cave, to keep a balance that the mining company had shattered when they drilled too deep. Ellen gasped, stumbling back. "They want a guardian," she said. "A replacement. To let one of them go." "Absolutely not," Leaf snapped. But Isaac looked up at her, weakly. "I saw it too. When I was inside the ice, they showed me everything. The bargain. It's how they survive." Ellen turned to the creature. If someone takes their place, they'll release the rest? The creature nodded once. Leaf stepped between them. Ellen, you're not. I'm not, she interrupted. But someone must. The silence that followed was long, stretching and cracking like the ice itself. Finally, a voice came from behind. I will. It was Isaac. Leaf swore under his breath. No, you just got out. They spared me, Isaac said, rising with effort. Because they needed someone to understand, to carry the story out, or to stay and protect it. That's why they showed me everything. Ellen reached for him, tears already welling in her eyes. There has to be another way. But the creature reached out again, this time offering the shard to Isaac. He took it, and as his fingers closed around the glassy ice, the chamber pulsed once more. The tunnel behind them reopened. The other frozen figures began to stir. The creatures stepped back, melting into shadow. I'll hold them here, Isaac said.
Go.
Before they changed their minds. Ellen stared at him, wanting to argue, but knowing she couldn't. She gave him one last embrace, her voice breaking. I'll tell them. Everything. I swear. He nodded. Make them listen. With that, Ellen and Leaf turned and ran. Behind them, the cave groaned again. The light faded, and Isaac disappeared into the ice. The blizzard had stopped by the time Ellen and Leaf emerged from the cave's mouth. The sky was bruised with the first hues of dawn, casting a pale pink light over the snow-covered valley. Their breaths steamed in the frigid air as they stumbled into the open, the weight of the cave still clinging to them like frost on their skin. Neither spoke. The silence was a fragile thing. The snowmobiles were half-buried, but still functional. Leaf brushed snow from the controls while Ellen stared back at the cave, now dark and unremarkable, as if none of it had ever happened. Do you think he's still alive? She asked finally. Leaf paused, then shook his head slowly. He made a choice. He knew what it meant. Ellen mounted her snowmobile in silence. As they roared back through the frozen forest, her mind reeled with images of the creature's hollow gaze, the frozen villagers, the shard of ice still warm in her palm. Isaac's final look had said more than any words ever could. By the time they reached the research base, the sun was clawing its way above the tree line. The others came rushing out, technicians, guides, a medic. Questions flew like arrows. Where have you been? Where's Isaac? What happened? Ellen didn't answer. Not yet. She walked straight past them and into the comms room, grabbing a notebook and pen. She began writing, fast, sharp, relentless. Names, locations, descriptions of rituals, carvings, dates. Everything the creature had shown her. It had to be documented. The story had to live. Hours passed. The base went quiet. Ellen was still writing when Lee stepped in, holding 2 mugs of coffee. They're demanding answers, he said. They'll get them, she replied, without looking up. He set the mugs down. They think we imagined it. That we were hallucinating. Trapped in the cold too long. Ellen closed the notebook and finally met his eyes. Then we show them the evidence. They took the drone footage, Leaf's recordings, the carvings in the walls, the symbol Ellen had redrawn on paper. Skeptical eyes scanned the files. Scientists murmured.
Some dismissed it outright.
Others weren't so sure. But when Ellen retrieved the shard of ice, Isaac had passed to her, now cold, but still shimmering faintly with inner light. Silence fell over the room. What is it? One of the geologists asked. A memory, Ellen said. And a warning. The lead researcher folded her arms. You expect us to believe an ancient creature bargained with you for a soul? I expect nothing, Ellen replied. But if we keep drilling into places we don't understand, we'll wake more than just stone. That night, Ellen walked out into the snow alone. The aurora shimmered above, its light softer now. The air was still. She closed her eyes. Somewhere beneath the ice, she imagined Isaac, standing watch. Not suffering, no, not anymore. He had become part of something older. A sentinel. A story made flesh. She placed the shard gently in the snow, where moonlight could catch it. Then she whispered, You are not forgotten, and turned to walk back, ready to tell the world. Weeks had passed since Ellen and Leaf returned from the mountains. The story, once confined to hushed conversations within the base, began to spread. A few newspapers printed vague headlines about a discovery in the Västerbotten wilderness. Online forums buzzed with speculation. Some dismissed it as folklore, a clever hoax wrapped in Scandinavian myth. Others clung to every word like gospel. But beneath the surface, something stirred. At the Geological Institute in Uppsala, a junior researcher named Sofia Holmgren was reviewing the mineral samples Ellen had delivered. One shard in particular had baffled every test. It emitted no radiation, bore no trace of known elements, and resisted attempts to be fractured or melted. And late one night, as Sophia stared into its glimmering core, she heard something. A whisper.
Faint. Distant.
Words not fully formed. She blinked, leaned closer. The sound was gone. The next day, she submitted her resignation and left the shard in a sealed case. Her note was brief. There's something alive in it. Back at the base, Ellen had taken to journaling obsessively. Names, dreams, patterns. Sometimes she woke in the night with frost on her fingertips. Leaf grew concerned, urging her to leave the site for a while, to rest. She refused. I can feel it still, she told him. Like a hum in the bones. Leaf didn't argue. He understood. He felt it too, especially when he wandered too close to the storage room where the shard was kept. Sometimes the lights flickered. Once, a wall clock froze for over 2 minutes before ticking back to life. Then came the seismic readings. Tiny tremors beneath the surface of the mountain range. Regular, rhythmic. Not natural.
Not tectonic.
A pattern. A pulse. Scientists dismissed them as background noise. But Ellen recognized it immediately. It's breathing, she said aloud to no one. Meanwhile, reports began trickling in from nearby villages. Frozen animals discovered in the woods. Strange symbols carved into tree trunks. Children talking in their sleep about frost kings and watchers below. And in one village, a farmer had vanished. His boots were found in the middle of a frozen lake, still warm. The government sent a quiet task force. No public statements were made. The valley was declared restricted due to unstable terrain. But the locals knew better. They boarded windows, burned old books, and whispered prayers before sleep. Ellen and Leif were summoned to a classified briefing in Stockholm. A man in a black wool coat greeted them. He introduced himself only as Herr Nystrom. His voice was calm, precise. We are aware of what you encountered, but we are not the first. He opened a file filled with grainy photographs, old expeditions, faces frozen in black and white, carvings matching those from the cave. One photo showed a younger Nystrom standing before a frozen altar. I was there in 1987, he said. We sealed it. We thought it was over. Ellen stared at him. It isn't over, is it? Nystrom shook his head. It has started again. And this time, it's waking faster. He slid a map across the table. New tremors, new symbols. A path was forming, leading outward from the original site. Whatever bargain was made, it's not finished, he said quietly. Ellen leaned over the map, her pulse quickening. Then we need to go back, she said. Not to stop it, Nystrom warned. To understand what it wants. And outside the window, the wind began to rise. Ellen, Leif, and Nystrom traveled north once more, this time not as explorers, but as emissaries. The government provided a helicopter loaded with cold gear, instruments, and a satellite uplink. No media. No announcements. Just silence and snow. They landed at the foot of the valley under a curtain of gray clouds. The trees stood taller than before, branches unmoving despite the wind. The mountain loomed in the distance, untouched but somehow watchful. Ellen felt it immediately. The vibration in her spine, like footsteps echoing in reverse, pulling her inward. They made camp near the original excavation site, now frozen over. The ice had reformed, but beneath it, the patterns were back. New lines. Circles within circles. They pulsed with faint light whenever touched. We weren't meant to break the seal, Leif whispered. Nystrom set up a perimeter of motion detectors and thermal scanners. But the machines kept glitching. Interference. As if the valley itself rejected technology. That night, they gathered around a heat lamp. Nystrom produced an old leather journal, its pages yellowed and curling. Inside were entries from the 1987 expedition, descriptions of the same cave, the same markings, and something else. A chamber we never opened, he said. The journal spoke of a second path, hidden behind a wall of black ice. A tunnel sealed by time and fear. Ellen stood. We're opening it. They returned to the cave the next morning. The main chamber greeted them with its familiar cold, the mural now brighter, almost wet with sheen. At the far end, past the stone altar, the black wall stood. Nystrom placed a hand against it. His breath caught. It's warm. Leaf powered up a hand drill, but the moment the bit touched the surface, the wall dissolved. Not melted. Dissolved, like smoke curling into air. Behind it lay a narrow passage, spiraling downward into blue darkness. They entered single file, headlamps flickering. The temperature dropped with each step. Soon, their radios were useless. The air pressed in with silence, so thick it seemed to speak. And then they reached the chamber. It was vast.
Domed.
A cathedral of ice. At its center stood a column of translucent crystal, suspended above a circular dais. It throbbed with a low hum, like the sound of deep water. Inside the crystal, something moved. Not a creature. Not quite. A shape, shifting like smoke, never fully seen. It turned as they approached, though it had no face. Ellen stepped forward. The hum grew louder. Her breath crystallized in the air. And then she heard it. A voice, not in her ears, but in her bones. You broke the silence. The voice was not angry. It was ancient. Tired. Nystrom fell to his knees. Leaf stumbled back, but Ellen stood firm. We didn't understand, she said softly. Few ever do. What are you? She asked. The figure pulsed. A wave of images flooded their minds, cities buried in snow, languages forgotten, altars lit by starlight. Bargains struck long before humans carved borders into maps. We were guardians, it said, until the pact was broken. Ellen's heartbeat pounded. What pact? But the figure only whispered. The circle is incomplete. Then the chamber shook. A tremor, rising fast. Cracks laced the floor. Ice split in long, jagged lines. Time bends here, the voice warned. And you've opened the door again. The crystal cracked. Leaf shouted, pulling Ellen back. Nystrom stood, eyes wide with a look of reverence and terror. We have to go, he said.